Well, earlier this week, I was cautiously optimistic when Dana White announced that UFC 249 was going down. I put up a video then just talking about all the fights that were on that card and previewing it. And at that time, when he made the announcement, he did not announce a location. A big reason why he did not announce the location is because he knew that a lot of people in the MMA media and people who are connected to them weren't too happy about the event going down and were going to do anything in their power to ruin it and to sabotage it. And unfortunately for him, after making that announcement, it was pretty quick when a reporter was able to figure out where the location was. It was at the Tachi Palace in California. And then from there, once they had nailed it down to California, a lot of people were reaching out to members of government in California to try to get it canceled. And unfortunately, now on Thursday, we found that they were successful. So prior to Dana White making this announcement, there was a press release put out by a California senator by the name of Dianne Feinstein. So I'll just read that here. So it says Senator Feinstein today released the following statement on news that the UFC was planning to go ahead with an April 18th pay-per-view event at the Tachi Palace Resort near Fresno, California. And then in quotes, I'm concerned by reports that UFC plans to hold a pay-per-view event in California in defiance of the state's shelter-in-place order. This event would involve dozens of individuals flying to California and driving to a casino. Dozens is hilarious. For a purpose no one can honestly claim is essential. I understand this event is scheduled to take place on tribal land and therefore is not subject to state law. However, at best, this event ties up medical resources and sends a message that shelter-in-place orders can be flouted. At worst, participants and support staff could carry the virus back to their home communities and increase the spread. I call on the UFC and the Tachi Yokut tribe to reconsider this event and delay it until a further date. We have to be responsible and mindful of all local, state, and federal public health guidelines. Going ahead with this event is not the right move. So that was something that we'd seen right before the UFC made their announcement that they were not going to do it. Afterwards, there was a report that the California governor, Gavin Newsom, actually reached out to Disney directly to get it shut down. So the storyline of why this event actually did get shut down, Dana White was pretty much saying, look, if this was in my power, I would have done it. But ESPN and then also the head of Disney came to him. So the head of Disney talked to the governor of California. The governor of California, I'm sure, was pushed along by other people who were close to him. I'm sure somewhere in a chain of events, an MMA journalist probably played a role. But the big piece of the puzzle here was Gavin Newsom contacting the CEO of Disney. So then they got in contact with Dana and got this event canceled. Now, one of the interesting things about the video that Dana White had where he was giving this interview with Brett Okamoto and then a couple of videos after is that he talked about how Fight Island is still going to be a thing. A lot of people are saying, well, this means Fight Island's dead. Well, this wasn't supposed to happen on Fight Island. Fight Island's a separate location for separate events. My question is that if ESPN is okay with Fight Island events, but they weren't okay with this, that means that in all likelihood, this is, it's not as though Disney is like against airing MMA events or airing live sports right now, so much as it is that they were pressured by California specifically, and they folded to pressure from California specifically. Now, I'll get into this a little bit. I want to kind of like split this up into like the MMA side and then just like pure coronavirus stats side. I'm trying to think if there's anything even worth talking about MMA or if it's just if now's the time to go into coronavirus. I guess for this, it looks like Dana is still trying to work on Fight Island. In one video, he said that April 25th is still a date he's going for. In another video, he said it's still going to be another month until Fight Island is up and running. So we'll have to see. I don't think that any final announcement has been made, so I don't know whether or not we're getting an April 25th card. He also was trying to say this is a postponement, not a cancellation. So to that end, if Fight Island is going to be a thing, does that mean that he's going to start moving fights from this card directly onto Fight Island, including the main event? Like, does this mean that Gaethje versus Ferguson is off now? Or does it mean that Gaethje versus Ferguson is just going to happen a few weeks later? If Gaethje versus Ferguson's off, then obviously you got to make Ferguson versus Tony and Gaethje versus Conor as was planned beforehand. But if not, they could still make that fight. I think at this point, if you're going to cancel 249 and if these Fight Island fights are not going to be pay-per-views, it would probably make the most sense to just go ahead and save Tony and wait until Khabib's ready and just run that fight then. They talked about how they were going to pay some of these guys anyway, so if I don't think Tony was in a position where he needed the money or else he was going to like default on any of his bills, but if that was the case, he should be fine anyway. So as far as I'm concerned here from an MMA standpoint, there are still a lot of other questions that need to be answered in terms of what's next. A lot of questions in terms of how the fighters on the card are going to be rescheduled, when their fights are going to happen. But it's definitely not a good thing that this got canceled. And especially when you look at a lot of the information with the coronavirus, which I'm about to. So regarding the actual coronavirus numbers here, and you're going to hear a lot of different things in the news. For one, a lot of this information is changing very quickly. If you talked to me about a week ago, I think the number that they were expecting to die in America this year would be between 100 and 200,000. That number dropped to 80,000. Now it's down to 60,000. That was a few days ago. I feel like by the time this video is up, it might even be lower than that. But that's also the number for all of America. Granted, 60,000 is a big number. It's just one of those things where we are shutting down the country over this 60,000 number. It's worth noting that the original estimates had included if we have social distancing. So it's not just the social distancing that's been affecting this number. A lot of it's been a lot of things that people are realizing with death rates, where the death rate is just cases divided by, or deaths divided by cases. But the thing is that if you have asymptomatic people who aren't getting tested, in reality, they have it, but it's not being calculated as part of the death rate. So they're realizing the death rate's a lot lower than what they had calculated for. But also the U.S. is a giant country. It goes about 3,000 miles wide, and there are areas that are more affected than others. So, for example, New York, I believe, has over 6,000 deaths of the 16,000 in America. So for the rest of the country, which represents, I don't know what, like over 300 million people still, we're looking at around 10,000 deaths to this point. We've also been hearing that we're starting to reach the peak of what we're getting right now, and that it's going to start to come down fairly soon. This was supposed to be a really bad week for us, but this is where we're at right now. There's also mention of how the deaths, what's being counted as deaths, in some cases, they may be a little bit liberal. I don't mean liberal as in like liberal or conservative. I mean liberal as in just being a little bit freely throwing around the check mark for coronavirus death. But it sounds as though most of the people who are dying of coronavirus have other significant illnesses or significant factors that are involved. But if someone has pneumonia and they have coronavirus and they die, it's not being counted as a pneumonia death. It's being counted as a COVID death. And what we're seeing is that the number of pneumonia deaths has actually gone down relative to other years. And it seems as though that could be a reason why. Another reason could be that everyone's social distancing, so you're not catching it from someone else. But that is worth noting. But even with that being said, even if we're just taking the numbers for what they're worth, most of the damage that we're hearing about is in New York. New York is a long ways away. The original location for this event was going to be Brooklyn. Just so we're aware, Brooklyn is about a 3,000 mile or almost 3,000 mile drive from where they were going to host this event. So if you're hearing a lot of bad stories about how bad that the coronavirus is in America, a lot of what you're hearing about is on the East Coast. The location of this event was going to be about 3,000 miles away, which is close to Fresno. And if we're going to look at the Fresno stats, right here, Fresno County to this point, 173 confirmed cases, 3 deaths. So that's the location where the fight was going to be. This is the location where people are talking about if dozens of people come in, there's going to be a lot of death. And, oh, thank goodness the UFC is not going to be able to run this event because there's be so many people who could die because the UFC is running this event in Fresno County, California. Fresno County, 173 cases at this point, 3 deaths. This is the place where thousands of people are going to die if the UFC runs their event. That's one of the things I'm hearing from a lot of people. Oh, think about how many people are going to get hurt, how many people are going to die if the UFC does this event. It's absurd. You're looking at the most extreme cases because that's what the news does. They point out the most extreme cases. There's a reason why you kept hearing about Italy. There's a reason why you kept hearing about New York. You hear about the worst cases. They don't tell you about the best cases. So you get this sort of skewed idea of what's exactly going on. And if you actually look into the data, it's a much better story than what you're hearing. And before the announcement that it was the California government that actually got involved, I was pretty annoyed with ESPN because it was known for a while that the UFC was trying to go ahead and make this event. They put a lot of resources into getting it locked up in terms of time, in terms of energy, money as well. So for ESPN to come in now and take it away from them, you're like, okay, well, what changed? In fact, the only things that have been changing over time is that things have gotten more rosy in terms of the statistics. Things have gotten more optimistic. The more that we know, the less doom and gloom that you kind of see. Like I said, about a week ago, it looked like we lose about 100,000 people this year, if not more. Now it's down to 60,000. And again, if we're getting close to our peak right now and the total is a little under 17,000, is 60,000 number going to hit? That's hard to say. There's talk about hydroxychloroquine being more effective than other medications in terms of lowering the death rate too. So maybe if that's something that gets used more, maybe that's going to slow it down even more. Hard to say. But the point being, this idea that the UFC was going to put tons of lives at danger here by running this event, it just doesn't match with the stats. It doesn't match with the information we're finding. And funny enough, right after this headline came out about the UFC canceling their event in California, you have this headline come out here. NBC is being absolutely obnoxious here. But it's California sees first daily decrease in ICU hospitalization. So we're finding that things are getting much better right now. And this talk about how everything's getting worse, it just isn't true.